Hi everybody, today we're going to be doing another energy check, and when I say energy check it means we're picking up on the energy with regards to how the reality, the realm is being affected currently. Remember that the forces are stirring a lot of debris to come out so that it becomes more visible, and within that there's most likely a lot of things that are also that have been hidden that are coming out as well. This is where I would use the example of going to a beach and actually seeing all the things that have been washed out on the beach itself by the ocean. And so in that case, in that way, this is how we need to look at the way that the energy is being presented. So I will address it with you. I do want to say that there is definitely a ritual that is taking place right now. And the reason I decided to call the video specifically what I called it is because I want to highlight the ritual that is making itself present. Now, when I bring it up, the points that I will bring up will be information that has been discussed a few years ago in terms of the Leviathan messianic element, which will be Cabalistic as well, because I mean, there's nothing as good as a ritual that's being done by a Kabbalist. So I'll leave that with you. It'll have ample links. And so please be mindful that when the information is being presented as it is, this is just an energy check-in, that you make sure that you don't become emotionally involved in the information in itself. As usual, the same rules apply. And also when it's discussed on the channel, it means that the information is being brought out, and when the information is being brought out, it means that certain things are being changed as it is being discussed and spoken about. So in this case, it's important to discuss the following material. I've made notes on what I've found. So I will be looking at my own notes as well, and I'll be bringing in a few things here and there just so that you understand what it's all about. Currently, we've got a few things that are coming up here that is notable or noticeable, and it's definitely related to the energetic. Like I said, the energetic debris that's coming out is also showing up things that have been done in the dark or in the secret, that for the most part has been hidden under a lot of other stuff so that people don't see it. Because since time has happened within the experience of learning to understand how to look at things, certain people who have been decoding information as well, over time people have become much more smarter in terms of how to see things as they are. I'm not speaking for everybody, I'm speaking only for how the time presents itself. And that's why these things are coming out. It's basically unraveling itself. And so the ritual is obviously always about the same thing. First of all, before I start and tell you about the ritual, I do need to explain that remember that this is based on a reality that is constructed for these people. And this is their construction of their ritual. And can it affect your reality? If you let it, if you permit it, if you allow it to reflect you on your internal self, that is where the reality may be affected. But if you can observe this with absolute calmness and just take note, then it means that you have taken note of the way that it is, because everybody is essentially connected in some way through certain ways the realities connect with one another or touch on each other. And so the ritual is for obviously the New World Order worshippers, and the audience needs a particular program to go towards, because as it stands, certain things have come to a standstill almost, where there's there's a lot of waiting to observe for certain things to take place, and there's a lot of focus on star lore to turn in a particular way. So the sky clock is needing to tick a certain way for these people to observe their ritual to take place. So as I'm going to be breaking it down in metaphysical manner, and as I said, most of the information you know already, but it'll be just interesting just to have a refresh on outlook on this whole thing. So the aim for this particular ritual, and there are many, and a ritual is not just a singular action of a thing that's being done. It's obviously done in multiple ways, in the ways that it can be done, as many heads to the to what's needed, to the hydra that has to go together for the overall picture to take place. And remember, these guys only plan for 100 years ahead of time every time. So the aim for this ritual is in short to basically blend the polarities with one another. So they're trying to switch certain things up or with each other. So if I say switching the polarities, I'm saying you have to look at this in terms of the Masonic tracing board, where the poles are on the Sephirotic tree are being switched over. So essentially, I don't see it literally happening. Obviously, it's not literal, but there's a symbolic switching up and over of certain things. So basically, where two hands are just literally doing this with one another. And like I said before, there's a lot of chaos energy involved in the background. So there's that focus on that, as much chaos as they can to actually cover up that particular frequency. And so we're looking at the aim, as I said, to switch the polarities, for the light to become dark and from dark to become light. And it uses the celestial movements in its process, using the influence of I almost said Orion. Let me leave it there. Uranus as well. So to eradicate certain types of spiritual people, that's always been the case. Nothing new there. You know about this. And for the ultimate purpose to surpass an old kingdom, which is symbolically related to an old world, or the world prior to where it is right now, for a particular religious revival sort of thing to take place, so that they can essentially become the empire of the universe, which it sounds very much Star Wars like, but we'll just leave it there. That's essentially the energy of this reality, of these game players that are there. This is their game, okay, and I'm showing you how their game is working right now. So the word for them, the word universe, suggests that they are obviously people that are very focused on the meaning of creating through old archetypal archaic ways in which they would do certain informations in particular media features. So they use the words through media to document the ritual, literally step by step. Okay, so what does this entail? It entails like I said, it's a Cabalistic ritual, and the ritual is for switching of the poles or pillars. In other words, they're going to, back in the day, they used to switch the poles so that Aries would be the first indicator for the start of the zodiac.
Born in the month of Aries, did you know that Moses took the Jewish people out of Egypt in the month of Aries?
And before Aries, there was a symbol that was actually an eagle.
Dive into history with the iconic eagle banner, the revered symbol of the Roman legions throughout the Roman Republic.
So, and before that, and so on and so on, you get my drift. So basically, this is where they're going with this thing, except if they had to change Aries' position, it would actually create some sort of change or alteration to most people, because people are actually aware of these things. A lot of people are. So the Zionism political movement is also another prop that they will use. It's mostly socio-political and land related. The element of Yahweh as a entity or a source of their light is also used. Obviously with this goes along thought forms, which are egregores in itself. The proponent of the emotional aspect that keys to the to the ritual itself is related to shame, guilt-based rituals, which means, excuse me, they've used Trump to do this with. And you'll see why I'm bringing that up, because that's a humiliation ritual that's busy playing itself out because of who he is, where he was back in the day, and what he signified to most of these people that are actually the followers of this particular ritual. And so there's also the economical war, which is presented as a war, but as I've said before, it's just a currency. It's just a frequency of the currency in which the way the system is operating itself within. So in other words, it's using water force or forces of the frequency of the Aquarian age, which is water. And this is why they're using the ritual to use the water ritual, or the water magic, if you want to call it that, to alter the frequency of the economy. Okay, and this is just a metaphysical explanation of it. And then there's obviously the usual suspects, the serpent, and so on and so on. The exposure basically breaks down the ritual. And when I say the exposure, we're talking about it. So it's basically opening it up for everyone to see. But they don't like things being exposed. So anyway, here we go. So it highlights one very big major ritual that has been playing itself out for many centuries. So like I said, it's not new, and it would be of interest to everyone to really note it, but to not give anything to it, so that when you see it, you'll know it, and then you go on and you move forward without becoming emotionally targeted by it or triggered by it, because specifically because of the financial element to it. So we need to explore the premise of the material and to take in consideration what it really means while you're in your safe space or within your secure space where you are within yourself. So, okay. So there's a focus on having to project a belief system that supports the narrative, as you know, for a particular empire, which is, as you know, the usual suspects, doesn't matter who they are, whatever their name is, it's the same premise. And it's using a lot of projection magic, using water magic to infiltrate the way that people see certain things, makes them feel doubtful about themselves, makes them feel they question where they come from, what they do, who they are, what they represent to one another. Relationships are also affected in this way. We're also looking at the soul energy as being targeted here. So there might be a lot of influences over the dream world in some way, but the dream world is also water symbolically. So you're able to understand that if you've not been sleeping very well, then understand that you might be very sensitive or oversensitive to certain things. You know what to do. You need to protect yourself, and like I said, you know what to do. If you don't know what to do, please go onto the playlists there about Psychic Protection 101, and you should be able to know how to protect yourself. So coming back to the props that have been used, they're using the Tree of Life, the Sephirotic tree, as you know, which is also the tree of the Kabbalah system. The information is from a biblical mythos and or religious bloodlines that are extremely much used in the guilt shame ritual. There are also there are two trees in Eden, so it's using these two trees. The one tree is based on the knowledge of good and evil, and the other one is based on the tree of death, which is essentially the Sephiroth and the Klipot, or the Kelipot, however they say it, and I'll explain that a little bit later as well. So these are the elements that are being used. Okay, so it means that the focus is essentially on duality. So it's basically like trying to force the view of the ones that are observing the ritual to become confused within themselves, let them become dumbfounded so that they will switch roles. So a role switching may actually take place, certain people behaving a certain way and then suddenly behaving in a different way. Remember that these rituals also infect thought forms or egregoric energies that are actually related to what is in the realities itself. So they have been doing this for quite some time, and it's only really just coming to surface now. Not really, it's been there for a while. It's just important to bring it up right now so that you can see what it's about. And also I need to bring to your attention that this means that they're using the Christian and the Judaic Cabalistic energy or belief system in which certain people are led to believe this, so that they can key into the end times belief that is basically being switched up. So there's a lot of information, a lot of material that's being spread around, like they're throwing a lot of stuff out there about the end of times and the chosen ones and the lambs to be whatever, etc., and the Messiah stuff. There's a lot of it. It's an overload of it. So they're trying to overload the system with that information. The only reason they're trying to overload it so much is because most people, like I've said, have basically stepped back from all of that chaos, because they realize that they're able to, and that you're able to protect yourself from these things. You don't need to have it in your reality, which for the most part is why they're working so super hard. But anyway, so I need to bring it to your attention that the realm is not essentially dualistic. The realm is not dualistic. It is based on a point of view in terms of how you think, how you impress upon the environment around you, and then to experience that within the matter or the material realm. So those are 3 points that I've just mentioned to you. If this material sounds a little bit unfamiliar to you, for those that are new, there's a lot of that information throughout the entire channel where I discuss that, particularly in the section called the meta history of creation. So have a look there where there is a video that says when 2 becomes 3. You'll understand why I'm telling you this. Nothing's changed in terms of my own information. Okay, so based on that, duality in itself is a fundamental flawed frequency in terms of trying to keep certain factors always working in opposite to one another, so that there's always a friction taking place. There's always no choice ever. There's always never an acknowledgement of free will. So if there was free will acknowledged, then you would have the ability to know that you have the freedom to make the willful choice within yourself. That is what free will actually means. So that is what duality does not let you experience, because duality is yes or no, never an in-between to think about it. And those who focus on the internal point of where the heart is, or the heart of the matter is, to actually step back from it, are then accused of being people that don't know their elbow from their arm or their hand or whatever. So whatever. Okay, these are just perceptions of socioeconomic engineering for people to always be in a state of mental chaos, so that they will never understand truly where they should be. So the ritual continues in the concept of using the ritualistic or the religious artifacts, which is called the Tree of Life, which is an artifact, and the Tree of Knowledge as the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil, as well as the Tree of Death, which or ending. And I'll explain to you what it actually means here. The Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil is a reference to forbidden it was a forbidden tree, supposedly, in the story of Eden, of Adam and Eve, that they weren't supposed to eat from that fruit of knowledge of good and evil. But in actual fact, obviously, it's promoting transhumanism, because once the ability to understand certain information, certain knowledge or wisdom, they can then conquer the Tree of Death, which is the tree that would essentially be a synthetic reference, or the artificial intelligence synthesis. Synthesis is the word that you need to look for wherever you hear it. That word, synthesis, is a key word to explain to you who's written that frequency or that story or that news bulletin, so that you take that in mind. When they say what they say, if they use the word synthesis, it's something to take note of. I'm just bringing that out there for those of you who want to know. So from the previous work, as I've said, the Josephic Messiah, the Leviathan and the Metatron and the Sacred Serpent, that information, the link is at the bottom. Go there, explore the information. It's a very information dense material, so go into that and understand the principle of why things are the way that they are, which enforces the Kabbalistic ritual in itself. So the Kabbalistic ritual, I've written here, it's important to take note that from the oral traditions of Judaic traditions, the following information is also going to become very relevant. The ritual of shame and sacrifice requires a savior or a hero who has to walk the walk of shame and sacrifice, publicly humiliated, in order for the switch to take place, because that switch is influenced or fueled by the frequency of that energy of the shame in itself. You see, you release a sense of energy out from you when you're feeling shamed or guilt, and that means you subject to or submit to whatever consensus is required of you. Now, oddly enough, as you'll see, some of these things are very important with regards to the astrological symbolism, because every age there's a new type of president that takes place that has to play a particular role, and that's based on the Zionist element as well. And so in this case, Trump plays the one for this age as a messianic savior, because of what he presented initially before. I mean, he has a bit of a rich history in that. I'm not going to talk about him. I'm talking about the archetypal representation of who he is. And so the purpose to bring out those files, there seems to be a trigger on that surname. Those files particularly, I'll put it at the bottom if you don't know what I'm talking about, is to humiliate the savior so that it sets the new part of the ritual in place. Okay, and so remember that I've explained here that Messiah, you need to understand that the Messiah is seen as different in many particular ways. In the Abrahamic religions, a Messiah or Messias is seen as a anointed one or a savior or a liberator of a group of people. In Judaism, HaMashiach is seen as the Messiah, often referred to as Melech. HaMashiach is a fully human, non-deity Jewish leader. Okay, and in the Greek translation of Messiah is Christos, which it occurs 41 times in the Septuagint, which is very important. The Septuagint is a set of documents that you need to actually find and actually read, because these people have a different view on certain things. It's very enriching in a way. So that's basically what a Messiah is. For those of you that do not know what that means, there's a link at the bottom to describe that for you. This is where the tree representation now starts to come in. All of these sacrifices are done with the acknowledgement of the Yahweh entity as a one true entity that rules, or a God that rules over the world, which really much keys into the same Egregoric story or the Archon story of the Yaldabaoth element, like the Demiurge. So they blend the information from Gnosticism and Kabbalism together, because I think that that's where it really is the same thing, essentially in different ways. So that's basically a reflection of itself as well. So while its roots are growing from the earth, or perceived as it's growing into the earth or the dunghill, which is how the earth or the materia is perceived by those that follow that particular belief system. The earth is seen as a pile of crap. the roots are growing through it. While it grows all the way to the top, it starts to give a focus on the crown, which is then crowned by whatever the Messiah is then crowned as. So I understand, and I've looked at the Kabbalah system in depth for many years. I'm not saying that I'm an expert on the information itself, but you do need to read it with a very aware state of mind, because there's a lot of switching of roles constantly, so that you'll never really fully get the whole gist of it. It's not a linear explanation, and using the mysticism behind it is what helps to keep that frequency going in the way that it does. So like I said, you need to go further back, and you'll read all the stuff, listen to the videos on the playlists. There's a lot of information out about it. I'm bringing this information in to you to give you the understanding of the ritual itself. I'm not going to reinvent or find the information as in-depth as I normally would do. So the tree is also symbolically referenced as the cross. And where the brazen serpent is tangled on, this creates the frequency of conflict within the crucifixion or crucifixion action. And this conflict creates then a trial or a particular trauma within the frequency itself. And so here's how it's playing itself out. So essentially, the ritual is played out as the fact that the serpent has to be crucified, so that its toxic nature will become, its poison will become the medicine that it would become. Essentially, the Kabbalists reflect that as the ego, whatever. But essentially, there is trauma bonding around that, and that is definitely related to the humiliation action or ritual that takes place. And so what it means is, after that particular crucifixion takes place, the information needs to be spread around. So the trees play a role in that as well. The reason this ritual of the crucifixion takes place is because it also symbolizes the information of the spirit cooking, where the common man, or the man that is seen as the common, or perhaps the person that is used as a sacrifice element, is placed on the table on which people eat food from. In other words, they take that whole principle thing about the Christian basis as literal, where the person would lie there on the table to be, and the food would be eaten from that body, and they would be nourished, they would be given rejuvenation, and their sins would be cleansed for them. So in other words, this whole ritual thing about humiliating, or whether he's guilty or not, it's not about that. It's about the fact that the ritual in itself is playing itself out because of what has happened prior to what he represents. So that is what you need to look at in terms of that, and that is basically what's playing itself out. So in other words, after that whole thing has taken place, after that particular expose of the files have been exposed and combed through, and the ritual will take as long as it takes, because I'm not gonna study how long it's been either, is the same. Then what comes from that is people then talk about it, and they come to that point where they would say, okay, I'm gonna tell you now that I'm predicting that there will be an apology made, so that it would appear as if he's now come to his senses, he's now died off the sins of what he was supposed to be charged with, so that he could do this for the greater good. And that is the ideology that's playing itself out. That is where this whole thing is going towards. Along with all of that, he's still used as a political figure, so he's important enough to still apply or use and create subterfuge in the way that he's being presented as a political figure, that he has the amount of power to still assert certain things into certain ways, which means that it keys into the whole idea where they used to say that the Messiah back in the day, whomever it was, is there as a rebel and in Afrikaans they say opstoker, and as someone who's done this, and he's a tempter, and a blah 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 blah. All of those words that describe that as a particular leader who's rebelliously trying to fight for his people. That's the particular frequency that they're trying to present as we speak. So coming through all of this, you'll see that after the supposed apology has been made, which probably would be public, to make it official, the information will then expose others in the same way, because that's how it continuously goes. They've done it with JFK as well, and straight after they've done what they did with him. I'm not saying that's going to happen to this guy. I'm saying he's important for this particular ritual because he's in this age where he plays this particular character. He plays it out. So it is on the stage for a Cabalistic ritual to take place as it is, as I've said before. Now, remember I said to you that Zionism is a very strong key here that's also used as a prop. For those of you who don't know what Zionism is, just by the way, the information where it's actually originated from, the Lurianic Kabbalah thing information seems to have been scrubbed from the sources online. Zionism is a Lurianic Kabbalistic invention that is a political motivation or movement that is about ethno-cultural nationalism, which is a movement that emerged in the late 19th century. I'm reading quote from the link that I've provided for you, and it is about the type of it's playing itself out in Europe to establish and support a Jewish homeland through the colonization of Palestine. That's never stopped. That's been going on and been going on because there's a lot of energy that comes out of that disturbance and distortion of that particular reality. And so a region corresponding to the land of Israel in Judaism and central to Jewish history, quote, Zionists wanted to create a Jewish state in Palestine with as much land, as many Jews, and as few Palestinian Arabs as possible, end quote. Link provided at the bottom. So you understand that Kabbalistic, Lurianic Kabbalistic movement occurred when the Orthodox Judaism threw them out of their homeland, and they found themselves in Spain, where they started up the Lurianic Kabbalism structure, which definitely gives a completely different structure. It's also out of the Lurianic Kabbalistic following that that book, the Josephic Messianic, that story comes from. And I've made it very clear there so that you understand exactly who is who in the play, in the structure of the play itself. Okay, so coming now to the socio-economic and socio-political prop, as well as used as a worldly script, which means each continent of the world is seen as a particular branch of that structure of that Sephiroth tree, or the tree of Sephiroth, however you want to say it. And in each part of the country or continent is seen a particular dominion that's placed over those particular countries as well. So there's that energy that's definitely coming through to try and influence the people within their continents where they live, so that they would all still be part of that bigger tree, or that tree. It sounded like bigotry, but anyway, we'll leave it there. So the ritual ideology comes through as in itself as having to enforce the control, of constant enforcing of the control when they seal in these presidential elements or puppets or players. I'm going to call them players. They all have to submit to experiencing a ritual of humiliation, which, as you know, from South Africa, there's been a few of those that have come out in the public as well in terms of what they are, and then suddenly they come back onto the same pathway again. So that's part of the ritual. It keeps playing itself out over and over and over. And so that ideology in itself is to perpetuate that frequency of shame-based ritualist, so that there's pardon found by the people, or even judgment overall. And so what we see here is that even the Greeks, when they had observed this whole process, they actually made it quite clear in the Septuagint that they said that it would mean that if this whole thing had to take place, if this ritual that essentially is based on Cabalistic lore, as I said, takes place completely, then it would result in a state of entropy imploding upon itself, and the order of what seemed to be sight, light, wisdom would collapse if something like that had to be played out. Because remember, now they want to switch the poles over, so that would essentially annihilate the aspect of the focus on trying to find philosophy, philos, light within the soul, the spirit. It would essentially erode that. So that is what the transhumanist movement is trying to attempt through this particular ritual. Like, they've been doing this, they've been trying to do this, like, I mean, you can see how they're struggling, literally. And every time they do this, it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's the wheel is like starting to lose its axis. That's basically what's happening. So it's important to bring the following aspect in as well, and I'll explain it for you here, about the klipotic or the kilipot tree, which is essentially something, like I said, that is growing with its roots at the bottom, while the other one is growing up, as you can see in the diagram. That is basically what they've got, and they want to switch that over so that it becomes the other way around, which is what they've been doing with the base chakra, putting it in the third eye. That's the color of your third eye is dark red, which is actually not the case. But anyway, I digress. So klipot is essentially, and I've found it from a link here, and I will just quote what he's saying, because it's important in supporting the structure here, is klipot means shells in Hebrew, and are essentially the negative manifestations and counterparts to the sephirot of the tree, or the tree of life, or on the tree of life. And klipot is how they pronounce it here, says are inherent in the sephirah as well, in that each sephirot is a kernel or a mocha. I don't anyway, contained within a shell, and there is the numerous other ways in which the tree can be described as a klipot. So from the link further on, quote, the word klipot comes from the Hebrew kelipot, or shells in Kabbalah, traditional Jewish mysticism. The kelipot aren't necessarily evil, but can be good or bad depending on the context. But the Hermetic Kabbalah, the European version of Kabbalah, they are considered to be the astral shells or beings that used to exist. This gives you a little bit of a focus on the egregor aspect as well. So, but which have long since been destroyed, soulless and bodiless. This is also where that story about the NPCs come from. Okay, so it's Cabalistic again. All right, so these vampiric entities do whatever they can to intrude upon our reality and feed on the psychological traumas of the living. Many of them are completely evil by any definition of the term and should be avoided at all costs, end quote. The following part, he says, start quote, the singular form of klipot is klippa, and it is more or less equivalent to the term demon in other modern vernacular. He goes on by saying, quote, in a hermetic context at least, klipot are malevolent ghosts that are dangerous for the living to engage with, and which must be executed whenever they are encountered, or obviously gotten rid of. Okay, so essentially, and end quote. Okay, the reference to evil spirits are referenced as klipot because the word demon has become too culturally loaded, and that's basically what he says about that. Okay, so it's important that you take note why these egregoric elements are coming through, because of sacrifice, because of rituals. That's basically thought forms that have been venerated to be given a godlike or useful structure, as you know from the previous work on the artifice of the trapezoid, as well as the Solomonic ring. The ring is broken. Have a look at that material. There will be links in there so that you can understand the need to use these type of things for its magical purposes. So now I did say I was bringing up the idea, or the story about Yahweh, which I think is actually a giant egregor. It makes much more sense now that you look at it from all the different ways that you can see it. Essentially, it is such a powerful thought form that it is essentially being recognized as once being a person, which I've said before in Beyond Thunderdome, that that's the deep stuff list there, that you can basically trace its elemental structure within the nature of the system overlay around as the toroidal field around the world, or the realm in which people exist within. We exist within a realm. And essentially it's also borrowed from the whole idea about the Odin god. So essentially it is just an archetype, energy field that has a lot of human-like characteristics that give it its egregor status, that make it still a prevalent force because most people still pray to that entity or that element. They just seem to call it whatever they call it. So that energy in itself is used as part of the ritual that is taking place. This is why I'm bringing it up, because that frequency seems to be much more present over the course of the last few months. Essentially it started to come back into itself again, because there's a lot of fear about what's been going on in the world. So they're very aware that people just call these things back up again, calling it back into place again, because they think that they're going to be disappearing, or that they could be having an end of day experience, which seems to be this whole promotion of end of days promotion. There's a lot of profiting from that. There's a lot of profit from the apocalyptic programs that are being projected into this reality. Like I said, you still have the choice to decide whether you accept it or not. So overall, I want to say that with rituals come egregores, because egregores are useful elements that are being taken into action to do certain things, to cause certain chaotic elements. Some are physically lived past or dead people that have become spirit, that have been used to be enslaved in that way. Others are thought forms that do not have a spirit connection to it at all. And you could literally see how it's been going on all about. And again, let me put it this way. Like I said, the frequency of the Yahweh, Odin, and Zeus, they're all the same element. It's all part of the God of Thunder element. So it's still playing itself out over and over, because as however many people believe in that particular frequency, that still keeps that frequency still alive. So now coming back to the actual ritual in itself, the serpent's ultimate goal, or the Leviathan's ultimate goal, is to uncreate everything. It's always been the case, and that has been made by God. The question is, which God? Because this entity, this thought form, has a persona to it that seems to believe that it is in control of the world, when in actual fact it never did create anything. It's just a reflection of a skewed idea on understanding that those that had existed as under the name Yahweh were actually people that lived in a particular land, and essentially the Yahwehists, because that's what they would be called, are just people that have followed their divinatory focus on that entity itself. There are numerous materials written about that particular element, that frequency, that thought form, and so it's often used and construed as this particular entity that's required for this particular ritual to take place, because they themselves don't actually agree on the same thing as, and pretty much the Gnostics either. So there's that focus. Is it mixed up with which god is now being crucified, and which one is this and which one is that? And the fact is, it doesn't matter which one it is. The fact is that there's a ritual taking place, and the key points are very visible, and the intention is the same. It's always been the same, Pinky and the Brain. So that is where it will stay, unless less and less people start fueling that frequency. That would actually be beneficial for mostly everyone, I think. So Kabbalah is focused on Jesus as the Messiah that has to be sacrificed, because he is represented as an evil serpent, which they name the son of Joseph, and his vessel, his physical form, he has to be sacrificed so that he can become something better and go from Joseph's house to the house of David. So there's the swapping over of poles taking place, which they would assume is pretty much how they could switch the parliamentary stuff up in the same way. So there's that thing, and those are the two serpents, or energies representing the two serpents. So from the section here called the two serpents, which comes from the Judaic influenced Torah, which suggests that it says this is a hidden secret. For Rivka had in her womb two sons, one from the right side and one from the left side, the left hand path and the right hand path, two sides of the tree, or two trees. Eso comes from the side of Samael, and Eso personifies the snake of Samael, through which he lied to Eve and caused humanity to die. In brackets, that's what they say here. And the Torah says that Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore two sons, Cain and Hevel, which is probably Abel. Abel came from the side of holiness, was killed by Cain, and Cain came from the side of the snake, because this is not told that Adam begot a son in his likeness according to his image, until Seth was born, and Seth was called like that in replacement of Abel. This implies that Cain was not in the likeness of Adam, i.e. in human likeness, but in the likeness of the snake, as our sages taught. End quote. Next quote. Just like humanity fell because of a snake, it must be restored by another snake, measure for measure, eye for an eye. Quote starts, Yaakov dealt with Esau cunningly, just as a serpent was cunning. Jacob, by being smart like the serpent, stole Esau's authority, although he suffered the consequences. The left hand will not know what the right hand does. That's that whole little saying there as well. So you'll never know whether you are actually looking at, especially these people that believe in this white hat and black hat, or they're all the same. It's all part of the same tree. It's all part of the same coin. That's basically the energy that you're looking at. It's a dualistic, flawed system that's being played out. That's what that whole issue is all about. So essentially, to come to the point of the ending of this little part here, which I'll put the link at the bottom for you to look at. It says that essentially because of this means that Jacob is also another snake, because he had to deceive Esau. Okay, but he's seen as and Esau is the snake of Samael, and Jacob is a holy snake. And Jacob was loved by his mother because he comes from the seed of the woman, as it is stated in the verse. Quote, I will put enmity between your seed, snake, and her seed, the woman, and you will bruise their heel. The two forces are meant to stand against each other, for it's written, end quote, and God created the Tananim, two great serpents, which is the information that I've just told you about, which refers to Jacob and Esau, and every living creature that moves, which refers to the levels between them. It is written, in the womb he took his brother by the heel, which means that he lowered him down by the heel from the place of spiritual authority he was supposed to be, end quote. If you look at the astrological symbolism of Orion, you'll see that often enough there's something there by his heel. There's often another astrological connotation to this particular description in this work, where it talks about particularly the certain movements that you will look at or that may be perceived, which is happening as we speak. So the most important thing which to take with you is essentially that the ambition is to be exactly the same as always, like I said, Pinky and the Brain, is to try and trick humanity to give up their spiritual support that they have, whatever you believe is your support. And how do you find that support? You go within yourself and you investigate who you are. You know yourself, know thyself, and you will know that you are able to be protected because of that wisdom. That means you are in control of your throne within your consciousness, where you are in control of what comes into your thoughts and what does not. And so based on that, that is essentially the ritual. I've explained it as best as I could, so that you can understand the principle as it's playing out in that play. That's basically it. I will leave this with you. It's very important that you take this, that you understand what it means. The principles essentially represent that they are trying to demoralize or to disconnect the system, or to disconnect America or the United States from its original financial structure, which is a pillar of its strength that it used to represent or represents in the world for what it stands, the eagle, and in that way Roman as well, which were basically playing part as the ritualized element for the particular savior to take place. After this whole thing is taking place, it'll go back like normal, like nothing's ever happened. This is why I'm saying these things that are coming up now, that are being played out the way that they are, they'll make you feel like you could be hurt by it in some way. But remember that you need to step back and go into your personal space and to reconnect with what is within you and connect with the original creative force that is beyond the bullshit and the fake playing shows, so that you get your own part, your own direction in motion. And I will leave this with you until next time.